Armand had always lived a simple life. He was not the type of student who looked for adventure. He preferred quiet corners in the library, warm tea, and a predictable daily routine. But everything changed the day he received an email from the Scholarship Housing Office. It said he had been approved for a special housing program where students from different regions of the world would live together to share cultures and ideas. Armand thought it sounded interesting, so he accepted without thinking too deeply about it. He assumed he would get a roommate from another country. He had no idea how unusual his roommate would turn out to be. When he arrived at the new dorm building, he noticed it was quieter than the others. There were only a few rooms, and the hallways felt strangely peaceful, almost like the building itself was observing him. He found his room number and took a deep breath. When he opened the door, he saw someone standing in the center of the room, completely still, as if he had been waiting for hours. The young man introduced himself with a gentle voice. "My name is Zyron. I am pleased to share this living space with you." His words were friendly, but something about his tone felt too formal, almost like he had practiced the sentence many times. Armand smiled politely and set his bags down. At first glance, Zyron looked human enough, but there was something different about him. His posture was perfectly straight. His movements were controlled, almost too smooth. His eyes seemed to notice every detail in the room, like he was scanning everything. Armand tried to ignore the strange feeling. Maybe Zyron was just shy or new to the country. They began unpacking their things, but Armand quickly noticed another odd detail. Zyron had only one small bag with him. Inside it were 3 pairs of identical clothes. A notebook filled with symbols Armand didn't recognize, and a small metallic device that looked advanced enough to belong in a science lab. Zyron carefully placed the device on his desk and covered it with a cloth, as if he didn't want anyone to see it. Armand didn't ask questions. He didn't want to seem rude. Instead, he tried to start a normal conversation, asking where Zyron was from and what he was studying. Zyron paused before answering, like he needed to choose the right words. "I am here to observe human culture," he said softly. "My program selected me for this task." Armand laughed a little. "I guess we all observe culture in some way." Zyron didn't seem to understand the joke. He simply nodded seriously and continued arranging his things exactly parallel to each other. Armand found this behavior strange, but he still assumed Zyron was simply very organized or maybe nervous. Over the next few days, though, the strange things kept adding up. On the first night, Zyron sat at his desk for 6 hours straight, reading an Earth geography book from front to back as if he had never seen any world map before. He asked Armand simple questions, like, why do humans divide land into countries? And what is the reason behind national borders? Armand tried to answer, but Zyron seemed confused by political explanations, as if he came from a place where such systems did not exist. Another time, Armand noticed that Zyron avoided bright lights. Whenever someone in the hallway opened a window or switched on a strong lamp, Zyron's eyes narrowed instantly, and he shifted away from the brightness. He preferred dim lamps and closed curtains. His eyes seemed to adjust to the dark better than any person Armand had met. One morning, Armand woke up early and saw Zyron standing by the window, staring at the sunrise with a strange expression, as if he was trying to understand why the sky changed colors. When Armand greeted him, Zyron turned around a moment too slowly, like he had been deep in thought. "I am studying your planet's rotation," Zyron said calmly. "It is fascinating," Armand joked again. "You talk like someone from another world." This time, Zyron did not laugh. He simply blinked and changed the subject. As the days went by, Armand's curiosity grew. He had lived with other international students before, but none of them acted like this. Zyron never went to the cafeteria, rarely ate in front of Armand, and seemed to have no sense of humor. Yet he was polite, friendly in his own way, and always willing to help with chores or assignments. It was hard to dislike him, which is impossible to understand him. Everything remained a quiet mystery until one stormy evening. There was a loud crack of thunder, and the power went out across the entire building. The room became completely dark. Armand couldn't even see his own hand. He stumbled around trying to find his phone's flashlight, when he noticed something strange. Zyron was moving easily in the dark. Not just easily, perfectly. He walked across the room without bumping into anything, reached the desk, and found the metallic device under the cloth as if he could see it clearly. Armand froze. Normal humans couldn't do that. Even animals with good night vision would struggle in this pitch-dark room. "How can you see?" Armand whispered. Zyron turned toward him, and in that moment Armand saw his eyes. They looked normal, but there was a faint reflective shine in them, like the eyes of some nocturnal creatures. It was subtle, but impossible to ignore. There was a long silence. Zyron lowered his gaze, as if he had been caught hiding something important. "It appears," he said quietly, "that it is time I tell you the truth." Armand felt his heart race. He stepped back slightly, not out of fear but out of pure shock. Zyron took a deep breath, not the way humans breathed nervously, but more like he was adjusting himself. "I am not from any country on your planet," he said. "I am part of an interplanetary cultural study. My arrival here was arranged by a program that hopes to build peaceful connections with humans." Armand stared at him, unable to process the sentence. His brain tried to reject the information. Maybe this was some kind of joke? A prank? But Zyron's face was calm and serious. His voice was steady. And the way he moved in the dark, it all started to make sense. "You're an alien?" Armand finally whispered. "Yes." Zyron answered simply. "I come from a place far beyond your world." Armand sat down slowly on the bed, holding his head with both hands. His whole life had been ordinary until now. He had never imagined sharing a room with someone from another planet. Zyron didn't approach him. Instead, he waited patiently, giving Armand time to breathe and understand. "I did not wish to frighten you," Zyron said softly, "but I cannot learn about humans properly if I must hide everything." Armand took a long breath. Shock slowly shifted into wonder. He had so many questions, but one came out first. "So, what exactly are you here to study?" Zyron hesitated for the first time since the confession. "I am here," he said carefully, "to understand how humans continue their species. My assignment is to learn about your reproduction system, your family structure, and the emotional connections that come with it." Armand's eyes widened again. Of all the topics, Zyron could have studied history, language, technology. This was the one he chose. Zyron continued, "My species reproduces in a completely different way. I was selected because I ask many questions and because I am patient. They believed I could learn and report the truth without judgment." Armand didn't know whether to laugh, panic, or ask 1,000 questions at once. But he could see in Zyron's face that the request was sincere. This wasn't about anything strange or inappropriate. Zyron genuinely wanted to understand humans, both scientifically and emotionally, and so as the power slowly returned and lights turned back on, Armand realized that his simple, predictable life was gone forever. Something new, strange, and extraordinary had begun, and he wasn't scared anymore. He was curious. After the shocking conversation during the power outage, Armand found it difficult to sleep that night. His mind kept replaying Zyron's calm voice, admitting he was from another world. Even though Zyron looked human, the truth now made every small detail make sense. His unusual behavior, his perfect posture, his strange questions, and his ability to see in darkness all finally connected like pieces of a puzzle. The next morning, Armand woke up before his alarm and found Zyron sitting quietly at the edge of his bed, reading a thick biology book. The sunlight from the window fell softly across Zyron's face, and Armand noticed how still he remained when he was focused. He didn't blink as often as humans did, and his eyes moved across the page in smooth, precise motions. Armand cleared his throat. You really are studying humans." Zyron gently closed the book and nodded. "I must understand your species from the beginning. Yesterday, I started learning about how your bodies function." Armand sat up, still feeling overwhelmed, but his curiosity overshadowed everything else. "So what exactly do you want to learn?" "You mentioned something about human reproduction." Zyron nodded again, this time more thoughtfully. "It is not only the biological process that interests me. It is everything connected to it. Your families, your emotions, your social rules, the way you raise your young ones. My species does not use the same method, so it is very difficult for me to understand. Armand wondered what Zyron's species did instead. But Zyron had said earlier that his species reproduced through something called energy transfer clustering, a method that sounded more like science fiction than anything. Armand decided to start with something simple. He went to his desk, grabbed an old-school science book, and placed it in front of Zyron. "This explains the basics," Armand said. "If you understand this, then I can help you with the rest." Zyron opened the book with great seriousness, as if holding something precious. He read faster than Armand expected, turning pages every few seconds, but he didn't seem to miss anything. Every few minutes he paused to ask questions. What is the purpose of this hormone? Why do humans have two different biological roles? Why do parents stay with their children for many years? Armand tried answering each question with patience. Sometimes he explained using examples from nature or society. Sometimes he drew simple diagrams on a notepad. And sometimes he discovered that he himself had never thought deeply about these things before. Teaching. Zyron made Armand realize how complicated humans actually were. At one point, Zyron lifted his head from the book and asked, "Why do humans use the word love when they speak about reproduction?" Armand blinked. Because, for humans, it's not only about the biological process. It's about connection, bonding, sharing life with someone. Zyron repeated the word bonding quietly, as if trying to understand its weight. My species does not bond in this way. We share energy, but not emotions. This surprised Armand. So your people don't form families like we do? Zyron thought for a moment before answering. We work together as groups, but emotional ties are unusual for us. Physical survival does not require them. Armand leaned back on his chair. That's interesting. For humans, emotional bonds are very important. Zyron lowered his gaze slightly. This is why I must study more. My report must explain not just the physical process, but the emotional meaning behind it. Armand appreciated Zyron's dedication. It was clear that this wasn't just an assignment for him, it was his purpose on Earth. Later that day, Armand decided Zyron needed more than just books. So he opened his laptop and played documentaries about human families, development, and cultural traditions. Zyron watched each video carefully, analyzing every detail. He paused often, asking questions like, why do parents smile when their child takes first steps? What makes humans risk danger for their families? Why do people celebrate childbirth with so much excitement? Armand realized that for Zyron, these were not obvious things. Humans grew up surrounded by emotions, family dynamics, and cultural expectations. Zyron, however, was seeing everything for the first time like a visitor looking at a completely new world. In the evening, they walked to the campus library. Zyron looked fascinated as he observed students talking, laughing, arguing, and helping each other. He wrote notes in his small notebook rapidly, using symbols that Armand couldn't read at one point. Zyron stopped walking and quietly observed a young couple sitting on a bench. They were sharing snacks and laughing warmly. Zyron leaned slightly forward, studying their behavior. Armand whispered, "They're dating." Zyron turned toward him with curiosity. "Dating is a stage before reproduction?" Armand coughed lightly. "Well, it's more like two people getting to know each other, spending time together, deciding if they want to build a future." "So it is preparation for bonding," Zyron said, writing it down. "Something like that," Zyron then added. "They appear relaxed. Their faces show signs of happiness." "Does happiness increase the chance of successful reproduction?" Armand almost laughed. No. Happiness isn't a biological requirement, but it helps people feel safe and connected." Zyron nodded deeply, as if this was a groundbreaking discovery. When they returned to the dorm later that night, Zyron seemed lost in thought. He sat on his bed, holding the notebook on his lap, his expression serious but not troubled. Armand asked, "What's on your mind?" Zyron answered quietly, "Your species is very complex. You reproduce physically, but everything around the process is emotional. You create families based on trust, care, and shared life. It is nothing like my world. Armand felt a strange sense of pride. Humans are complicated, yes, but that's what makes us who we are. Zyron looked at Armand with a calm but focused gaze. Please continue teaching me. I must understand both the science and the meaning. Armand nodded. Okay? We'll learn step by step. Over the next few days, Armand helped Zyron study life cycles, child development, cultural traditions, and moral values. Zyron never complained, never got tired, and never lost focus. Every answer Armand gave sparked 10 new questions. Sometimes Armand had to open the internet and research things he himself didn't fully understand. At one point, Zyron asked a question that made Armand pause completely. Why do some humans decide not to have children, even though they can? Armand thought for a moment. Because people have different dreams. Some want families, some want careers, some want freedom. Humans have individual goals. Zyron repeated the word individual very slowly. My species does not have this concept strongly. We act as a unit. Your species acts as both individuals and groups. Difficult to explain, Armand smiled. That's what makes humans interesting. Zyron's eyes softened a little. Yes. I want to understand all of it. On the fourth day of studying, Zyron made a surprising announcement. Armand, he said gently, books and videos help, but they do not show the emotional part clearly. I must observe families closely. I need to see how parents interact with children, Armand agreed. I know a place. A child care center near the campus. They let volunteers spend time with children. Zyron's expression brightened in a subtle way. Then we should go tomorrow. That night, Armand watched Zyron reread his notes again and again. The alien looked almost like a student preparing for a test. And in a way, a cue was but the test was humanity itself. Armand realized something important as he lay. In bed, Zyron wasn't just learning facts. He was trying to understand the heart of human life. He was trying to understand why humans form bonds, love each other, raise children, and build families. These were things humans often took for granted, but to Zyron, they were extraordinary mysteries. As the room softened into silence and the night grew deeper, Armand knew one thing for sure. This journey was just beginning, and both of them were changing slowly but surely. The next morning, Armand and Zyron walked toward the child care center. Zyron looked unusually alert, almost as if he was preparing for an important scientific experiment. His steps were calm, his eyes shifting gently from one part of the street to another, noticing everyday human behavior with great interest. Armand sometimes forgot that Zyron was not just a new roommate, but a visitor from somewhere far beyond the sky. Outside the child care center, they could hear soft laughter and the playful voices of children. Zyron paused for a moment. His expression showed curiosity mixed with something that resembled nervousness. Is something wrong? Armand asked. Zyron shook his head slowly. No, I am simply preparing myself. I have never observed young humans before. They entered, and the staff welcomed them warmly. They allowed both of them inside after Armand explained that his friend wanted to learn about how children grow and interact. The caretakers assumed Zyron was a foreign researcher, and the story worked perfectly. Inside, children were playing with blocks, drawing pictures, and chasing each other around the room. The colorful drawings on the walls, the tiny chairs, and the innocent smiles created an atmosphere full of energy and warmth. Zyron watched the scene carefully. His eyes followed the children's movements with deep focus, as though he was trying to understand a different kind of language, one spoken through laughter. Small gestures and simple actions. One child, a little girl with curly hair, suddenly approached Zyron and offered him a plastic toy. Zyron froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. Armand smiled and whispered, "She wants to play with you." Zyron gently took the toy in both hands. "Thank you," he said softly. The girl giggled and ran back to her friends. Zyron turned to Armand. "She offered me an object. Was that a sign of trust?" "Exactly," Armand replied. "Children often show trust through simple actions." Karen wrote something in his notebook immediately. As the morning went on, Zyron watched how caretakers comforted children who were upset, praised them when they did something good, and corrected them gently when needed. Each interaction seemed to open a new door in Zyron's mind. At one point, a small boy fell while running. Before he could cry for long, a caretaker lifted him, checked his knee, and hugged him softly. Zyron watched the whole scene with intense curiosity. "This is interesting," Zyron whispered. "A simple fall causes distress, and another human responds with comfort. This comfort reduces the distress. Is this what you call emotional support?" "Exactly," Armand said. Zyron added more notes. "And this emotional support helps young humans grow into confident adults?" "Yes," Armand replied. "Humans need care when they're young. It's important for their development." Zyron moved around the room slowly, observing different moments: a group of children playing a team game, another group building a tower with blocks, and some sitting together sharing crayons. Everything fascinated him. After they left the center, Zyron remained unusually quiet. Armand noticed the thoughtful expression on his face. "What are you thinking?" Armand asked as they walked back to campus. Zyron looked up at the sky. "I am thinking about the amount of attention and patience required to raise a human young one." "It is very large." Armand laughed softly. "Yes, it is. It's surprising," Zyron continued. "My species does not raise young ones in this way. We share energy, and the cluster develops independently with guidance from the collective. But you humans invest so much time, care, and emotion." Armand nodded. "That's what makes families special." Zyron slowed his steps. "This means human reproduction is not just a biological event. It begins a long journey filled with constant emotional effort." "Exactly," Armand said. "It's a lifetime responsibility." Zyron closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing the information carefully. Later that afternoon, they returned to campus. Zyron wanted to observe human interactions in different settings, so Armand took him to a busy park near the university. Families sat under trees, students took photos with friends, and children ran around freely. Zyron pointed toward a family sitting on a picnic blanket. The parents were sharing food with their 2 kids. "Look at them," he said. "The adults give food to the young ones before eating themselves." "That's normal," Armand explained. "Parents always put their children first." Zyron shook his head slightly. "Your species is full of interesting rules." For a while, they sat on a bench, just watching people. Zyron seemed deeply immersed in every detail. At one point, they saw a couple argue quietly near a fountain. Their voices were low, but their expressions showed frustration. Zyron quickly turned to Armand. "This is confusing. They are clearly bonded, but they are unhappy at the moment." Armand sighed. "That's part of relationships too. People argue sometimes because humans have strong emotions. Misunderstandings happen. Does this affect reproduction?" Zyron asked. "Not directly," Armand answered. "Human bonds are not perfect. They can be emotional and complicated. But people try to work through problems because relationships matter." Zyron wrote it down slowly. "So emotional conflict is also part of human bonding." "Yes," Armand said. Next, Zyron observed a teenager comforting his younger sibling, who had dropped an ice cream. The older sibling gave the younger one his own ice cream without hesitation. Zyron was surprised. He gave away something he liked, just to make the younger one happy. "That's love," Armand said simply. Zyron looked at his notebook again. Love is a very powerful thing. It influences actions more than logic. You could say that. As the sun began to set, the orange light reflected across the park, making everything look peaceful. Zyron closed his notebook and looked thoughtful. "Armand," he said softly, "your species is fragile physically, but emotionally. You are incredibly strong." Armand raised an eyebrow. "Fragile physically?" "Yes. Humans are easily harmed. You tire quickly, and your lifespan is shorter compared to many species. But your emotional strength, your ability to care, sacrifice, and bond is powerful. It guides your actions and shapes your families." Armand had never heard anyone describe humans like that before. It made him feel strangely proud. They started walking back toward the dorms. On the way, Zyron stopped again when he saw a couple taking a picture together by a tree. They were smiling brightly, holding hands. "Is this a normal human activity?" Zyron asked. "Taking photos?" "Yes," Armin said. "People like capturing memories with someone they care about." "Memories," Zyron repeated. "My species shares memories through energy exchange, but your species creates them through experiences." "Exactly." Back in the dorm room, Zyron sat down and began organizing his notes into different sections. Armand noticed the notebook was now almost half filled with small symbols, lines, and diagrams. Zyron spoke without looking up. "I am beginning to understand the complexity. Reproduction in your species is not just a process for survival. It is surrounded by emotions, responsibilities, cultural traditions, and personal choices." "Yes," Armand said gently. "You're learning fast." Zyron looked at him with a calm but sincere expression. "Your guidance is helping me see your species clearly. Without you, I would misunderstand many things." Armand felt a small warmth in his chest. "I'm glad I can help." That night, while Armin worked on his homework, Zyron continued writing quietly. The only sound in the room was the soft scratching of Zyron's pen. Hours passed, but Zyron didn't stop. It seemed he was trying to understand every angle, every detail, every emotion attached to human life. Before sleeping, Zyron finally spoke. "Armand, today I learned something important." "What did you learn?" "That humans build families not only with biology, but with emotions. And sometimes emotions are even stronger than biology." Armin smiled. "Yes, that's true." Zyron looked down at his notes, his voice almost gentle. "This makes your species very unique." And as the lights dimmed, Armand realized that Zyron's understanding of humanity was growing day by day. What began as a simple study had turned into a deeper discovery, one that was changing both of them in quiet but meaningful ways. If you want Part 4, expanded to 1,300 words, I can continue. Part 4 continues from where the feelings, confusion, and quiet tension were building. But now everything becomes deeper and more emotional in a slow, natural way. The next morning arrived softly, with pale light spreading across the sky. The air felt calmer, but inside the hearts of both of them, a strange storm was still active. They woke up early, although neither had slept well. The memories of last night were still fresh, floating somewhere between worry and hope. She stepped outside first, taking a slow breath as if preparing herself for another long day. He followed her after a moment, watching her silently, trying to understand the thoughts she kept hidden behind her calm face. Even though they stood just a few steps apart, it still felt like there was a long distance between them, an invisible space made of unanswered questions and unspoken emotions. She pretended to adjust the small plants growing near the entrance, but she was actually buying herself time. She didn't know how to begin the conversation they needed. He also didn't know what to say, but he knew he couldn't remain quiet forever. Something inside him was pushing him gently, telling him that today he had to be honest, not just with her, but also with himself. When she finally turned toward him, their eyes met for just a brief moment. It was enough. He could see the worry sitting quietly inside her eyes, and she could see the confusion softly hidden in his. Neither wanted to hurt the other. Neither wanted things to become harder than they already were. He stepped closer, slow and careful. "You didn't sleep," he said in a soft voice. She shook her head. "You didn't either." He nodded. A small silence followed, not uncomfortable, but full of meaning. It was the kind of silence that actually spoke louder than words. She tried to keep herself busy again, cleaning the wooden table or checking the baskets, but he could see that her hands were shaking very slightly. Not from fear, but from emotion she was suppressing. He reached out and gently stopped her hand. "You don't have to act strong all the time," he said with calm sincerity. "Not with me." She looked at him, and for the first time since morning, she let her guard drop a little. Her shoulders relaxed, and she took a careful breath. "I'm not trying to act strong," she said. "I'm just trying not to think too much." "But you are thinking," he replied. "I can see it." Her eyes softened, and she lowered her gaze. Yes, she admitted quietly. I am. He waited, giving her time to find her words. She appreciated that about him. He never forced anything from her. He never rushed her. He always let things unfold at their natural pace. Finally, she spoke again. Yesterday changed something, she said. I don't know what it is yet, but it changed something. He understood exactly what she meant. He had felt it too. Something had shifted between them, slowly but clearly. Like two paths, gently moving closer, without anyone pushing them. I know, he said softly. I felt it too. Her heart made a small and quiet jump when she heard those words. She tried to hide it, but he noticed the tiny change in her expression. Not because he was trying to read her, but because he had started to notice everything about her, her habits, her small reactions, the way she moved, the way she tried to hide her feelings. It had happened naturally over time, as if her presence had grown roots inside him, without him realizing it. They walked together toward the fields to begin the day's work. The sun was still rising, its warm light spreading over the land, painting everything in soft golden colors. The morning breeze carried the smell of fresh earth and new beginnings. They worked side by side, quietly at first, letting the world around them settle into calm. After some time, she spoke again, her voice low and gentle. I didn't expect you to stay. I didn't expect to stay either, he replied honestly, but I wanted to. She stopped and looked at him, trying to read his face, searching for any sign of uncertainty. But his expression was clear, steady, full of a sincerity that made her heart feel warm and strangely safe. Why? She asked, almost whispering the word. He thought for a moment before answering. He didn't want to say something unnecessary or something that could confuse her more. He wanted to give her the truth. Because you make me feel like I belong somewhere, he said quietly. Her breath caught for a moment. She wasn't expecting an answer like that. Her heart softened instantly, like a tightly held knot suddenly loosening. She felt something inside her shift, something warm and beautiful, something she wasn't ready to name yet. But she didn't want to ignore it either. You belong wherever you choose to be, she said softly. But I chose this place, he replied, looking at her with calm honesty. I chose to stay near you. Her cheeks warmed slightly at his words. She turned away, pretending to check the crops again, but she couldn't hide the small smile forming on her lips. He noticed it, but he didn't say anything. He simply continued working, giving her space to feel whatever she was feeling. The rest of the day passed slowly. They talked more than usual, not about serious things, but about small, everyday details. Those small conversations made everything feel lighter between them. Every laugh, every shared look, every moment they spent side by side made the space between them grow softer and warmer. Later in the evening, when the sun began to sink behind the mountains, they sat outside again, just like the previous night. But this time, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful, comfortable, almost comforting. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and looked at the sky, turning gentle shades of orange and pink. He sat beside her, close enough to feel her presence but still respectful of her personal space. The air carried a calm quietness, and neither wanted to break it. After a while, she finally spoke. I don't want things to change too fast, she said quietly. He nodded. They don't have to. She looked at him, surprised and relieved by his answer. You mean, you're patient enough? I will be as patient as you need, he said with a small smile. This doesn't have to rush. It doesn't have to be confusing. We can move slowly. As slowly as you want. Her eyes softened, and she felt a gentle warmth inside her chest. Thank you, she whispered. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, then spoke with a gentle calmness that touched her deeply. I just want you to feel safe, and I want you to know I'm here. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to be here. Those simple words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: trust. Comfort and a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, life was giving her a new chapter. As night settled around them and stars appeared slowly in the sky, they remained seated together, letting the silence carry their unspoken emotions. Nothing rushed, Nothing forced, just a gentle closeness growing naturally. Step by step, beat by beat, everything had begun to change. And both of them felt it. But for the first time, neither of them was afraid of that change. Part 5 begins the next morning, when the feeling of quiet closeness between them had grown even more, even though neither of them had put it into words yet. The sun was not fully up when she stepped outside. The air felt cool, and the world around her was peaceful, as if everything had paused to wait for the new day. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the breeze brush gently against her face. He came out a little later, stopping when he saw her standing silently, her shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Something about the way she stood there made him pause. She looked calmer today, but there was still something hidden in her expressions, something she was still trying to understand within herself. "Good morning," he said softly. She turned and smiled, a small, natural smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning." The smile made his heart feel warm, but he kept his expression steady. He didn't want to overwhelm her or make things feel too intense. He could sense she was opening up slowly, and he didn't want to break that gentle progress. They began their morning chores together the same way they had for the past few days. But something was different today. Every small moment felt meaningful, standing together near the water, sorting tools, walking through the fields. They weren't talking much, but the silence between them felt friendly and safe. While working, she suddenly asked, "Did you sleep well last night?" He glanced at her with a soft smile. "Better than before." "Why?" she asked, curious. "Because yesterday felt peaceful," he replied honestly. "And because I'm getting used to being here." She nodded. "I'm glad for you," he added quietly. She felt her heart skip for a moment. She pretended to focus on the crops again, but she knew he had seen her small reaction. He didn't tease her or say anything more. He simply continued working, letting the moment settle gently. Later, they took a break under the shade of a large tree. She brought him a cup of warm drink. He took it with a grateful smile and said, "Thank you." She sat beside him at a comfortable distance. "You don't have to thank me every time," she said softly. "You're living here too? It's natural." "I thank you because I mean it," he replied. "Every small thing you do, it matters to me." She looked down at her hands, touched by his words in a way she didn't expect. The truth was, she had started noticing his presence more than she wanted to admit. Whenever he walked near, she felt a strange calmness around her. Whenever he spoke, she found herself listening more closely than before. And whenever he smiled, something warm stirred inside her chest. She wasn't ready to name that feeling yet, but she wasn't ignoring it anymore either. After finishing their break, he helped her carry a heavy basket without being asked. She watched him quietly, noticing how thoughtful he was. He didn't do things to impress her. He did them because he genuinely cared. That sincerity touched her heart in a way nothing else had in a long time. When they returned home in the afternoon, a gentle wind was blowing. She started preparing food for the evening, and he offered to help. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." Working together in the small kitchen area felt surprisingly natural. He cut vegetables carefully while she prepared spices. Their hands moved in rhythm, and sometimes their fingers almost touched. Each time they got close, they both felt a tiny spark inside, but neither mentioned it. He watched her quietly while she worked. "You are always so focused," he said. She raised an eyebrow playfully. "And you are always watching." He smiled softly, slightly embarrassed. "I just notice things, maybe more than I should." She laughed, gently, a soft, warm sound that made the whole room feel brighter. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to hide it." Her laughter affected him deeply. It felt like sunlight had entered his chest. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. He didn't tell her, but her small smiles and gentle voice were beginning to mean more to him than he ever expected. She wasn't just someone he lived with now, she was becoming a part of his everyday life, a part that made everything feel lighter and more meaningful. In the evening, after eating, they stepped outside again. The sky was turning golden, and the soft light made everything look peaceful. They walked a little farther than usual, slowly making their way toward a small hill not far from the house. She enjoyed walking there, and he had noticed it. Today, he wanted to accompany her, not to disturb her, but simply to be near her. When they reached the top, she sat on a large, smooth rock. He sat a little distance away, giving her space. They watched the sky quietly as the last bit of sunlight faded. After a few moments, she spoke, her voice calm, but a bit thoughtful. "You've changed the atmosphere here, Hal." He asked gently. She thought for a moment. "Before you came, everything felt quiet, but lonely. Now it feels quiet, but peaceful. There's a difference." He looked at her carefully. "Is that a good thing?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it is." He smiled, relief washing over him. "Then I'm happy." Another silence settled between them, but it was a soft one. She leaned slightly against her knees, watching the sky turn darker. A few early stars began to appear. The cool breeze touched her hair and made a few strands fall across her face. Without thinking too much, he reached forward slowly and tucked the loose strands gently behind her ear. His touch was light, careful, respectful. She froze for a moment, surprised by the gesture. She didn't pull away. Time seemed to pause around them. She looked at him with wide, soft eyes, and he looked back with quiet sincerity. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The moment was delicate, calm, full of emotions they were both still discovering. After a few seconds, she lowered her gaze, her heart beating a little faster. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know," he replied softly, "but I wanted to." Her chest felt warm again, warmer than any moment before. She didn't move away. She didn't tell him to stop. Instead, she let the moment settle inside her heart. They stayed on the hill until the sky turned completely dark. When they walked back home, their steps were slower, and their shoulders gently brushed once or twice. Each small touch sent a quiet shiver through both of them. When they reached the house, she paused near the door and looked at him. "Thank you for today," she said softly. He smiled, his eyes full of gentle warmth. "I should be the one thanking you." She shook her head. "No, you made today feel different, in a good way." He didn't reply for a moment. Instead, he looked at her with a softness that made her heart tremble slightly. "If it felt good for you," he said quietly, "then it was a perfect day for me." Her cheeks warmed, and she slowly turned toward the door. Before entering, she said one last thing, her voice soft like a whisper carried by the wind. "Good night." "Good night," he replied. She walked inside with a small smile. Her heart full of new feelings she was still trying to understand. He stayed outside for a few moments, looking at the stars and thinking about her, realizing more clearly than ever how much she mattered to him now. Everything between them was changing slowly, gently, beautifully, and both of them were now willing to see where this new connection would take them.